Oh my god. I try to take a week to work on Lady Bits. What? Everything goes crazy. Seriously, I cannot leave the internet alone for 5 seconds these days. This is a topic that is really of interest to me. The limits and give and take of free speech, and like two things happen in the same damn day, and I'm like, why? Why can't people just use their sense? Like, I believe there's a big difference between political correctness and basic common decency. And I think that you can disagree with something vehemently, have something absolutely not be to your taste, and defend it on free speech grounds. And then there's just bad business. What are you thinking? Different issue. And two things happened today. I have articles for them here. The first one was that Roseanne Barr decided to blow up her career with a really stupid tweet about Valerie Jarrett. And I'm not even sure YouTube will let me run this tweet. You'll see it compared her to an ape. It was worse than that. It basically said she was the child of the Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes. And it was like one of those drunk tweets, only she probably wasn't drunk. Uh, I'll hold my comments for a minute, but the response was head spinningly swift. You'll see here that um, Roseanne's show was canceled, and then her agent dropped her. Her agency, ICM, dropped her, which one of the big agencies in the US. So she's lost her representation as well as her show. This is a sign that Hollywood is running far, far, far away from Roseanne. Now, celebrities say dumb things all the time. Why did this one get the attention it did, and why was the response so swift? That's the big question here. Well, simply, it's not about whether you are offensive or not, it's whether you violate your brand. So if Roseanne had been on a cable show or something like Netflix, it wouldn't have been as big a deal. The fact that she was on ABC on a sitcom is the significant thing in terms of part of the reason the show got canceled. Now, why did it happen so fast? This implies that there were already problems on the show. And there's been a trend this year. I know I read this as well about the show Designated Survivor, that the reason that show got canceled was not due to low ratings. It was due to the fact that they couldn't keep showrunners. They'd gone through an inordinate number of showrunners, which are incredibly important people that actually make sure the show works. And showrunners quitting regularly indicates that there's some sort of issue with the program. It can be just a ridiculous shooting schedule. It can be that the key talent is difficult to work with, and that's the big red flag with Roseanne. Roseanne is notorious for being awful to people who work on the show. That's why I was disappointed that she got another chance at a sitcom in the first place. She was notoriously brutal to the writers on her original sitcom. She treated them as imminently disposable. And the fact that Wanda Sykes, who clearly has some sort of deal with ABC because she's involved with multiple shows on that network, but she immediately said, I will not be returning. And I suspect she wasn't the only one. And I suspect that ABC was in a position where people were fleeing the program, and not just producers and executive producers and showrunners and the people who actually produce the program, but also I suspect that the advertising was soft. TV shows, TV companies care less about ratings than they do about ads. When I worked on Much Music back in the day, the ratings were never great compared to network numbers. What Much Music had was a targeted demographic that advertisers really liked. Much Music catered to teens and 18 to 24 year olds in a way that a lot of channels didn't. And that was the demographic at the time that advertisers wanted, because they see that demographic as being very impressionable to ads. And so it wasn't that Much Music got huge numbers. Their numbers were just targeted in a very specific place. And ABC has gotten a lot of ad dollars coming into its network for the Shonda Rhimes shows and Blackish. Blackish gets huge product placements on their show. It's like, look, Buick and things like that. Like, there's product placements. It's not just commercial space. It's the product placements within the show. Those are big dollars. And I really suspect that Roseanne wasn't getting those lucrative deals done because the show was highly political, and I thought the effort was quite laudable to sort of bridge the divide. I don't think it was as well executed as it could have been, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that what happened to Roseanne isn't a free speech thing. She can say what she wants on Twitter. She can be as offensive as she wants. But it's a business paradigm. It was really bad business. And it really shows to a lack of self-control. It's reasonable to assume that if she talks that way on Twitter over something that really doesn't matter, how does she talk to people in real life? Well, if history is any guide, not well. And that can sink a show that is otherwise doing well. It can also save a show if there's a particular demographic that advertisers want to cultivate. The Black middle class is a huge, huge thing for advertisers right now, which is why, it's so strange that ABC has been pissing off its Black creators as well. Shonda Rhimes, we know she's going to Netflix. She's still executive producing existing shows, but she's not making any new ones for ABC. And there was an infamous creative difference with what's his name, Kenya Barris, I believe, the creator of Blackish, over a particular script that ABC censored at relatively the last minute as being seen as too contentious for American audiences. So, contrary to assumptions, they're not just going after the right. ABC is clearly concerned about going too far afield in any direction. I believe the show that they canned in Blackish was about the NFL, but I didn't look it up. I didn't expect to go in this direction. But yeah, it's not a question of right wing, left wing. Disney as a company is very careful to sit the fence that way because their Florida theme parks are located in Florida, which tends to have a Republican governor. So they try to offer very middle of the road fare, but sometimes they're like, no, we just have to come down on a certain side. For instance, I'm always impressed that when you go to the research facilities in Epcot Center, they just acknowledge the theory of the evolution as a real thing. They don't call it an unproven theory. No, this is science. We accept evolution. And I've seen some park staff get into it politely because it's Disney, but they don't back down in the face of some religious conservatives that want to argue that evolution isn't real. So they really have a balancing act in this regard. And I think it would have been, they probably would have had an internal revolt after the Blackish thing if something had not happened to Roseanne. But the fact that it was an outright cancellation speaks to a financial bottom line to me. So I am not going to jump on the bandwagon and go, yay, ABC. They, I think, did it because they had to, not because they wanted to. I've dealt with enough television executives to not think for a second that they make decisions on moral paradigms. It's always financial. Which brings me to the second part of this free speech debate of the thing that happened today. The latest scandal involving Valve and the way it curates its content. And I saw this on a CNN segment late last night, just as I was going to bed. And I'm like, oh shit, here we go. Seriously, this is the CBC version, because this one's even, don't get me started on this article. Somebody decided to make a game that was about school shootings, and you can play as SWAT or you can play as the person doing the shooting, and you see civs killed, cops killed. This is not a nice looking game. So obviously they're just going for, I don't know, some sort of outrage bucks. I don't know what the thinking is here, but you know, they get these grieving parents and they quote them unchecked. I mean, this article, the reason I called out this article is that a founder of the school safety advocacy group Americans for Class, whatever that means, actually flat out said, the last thing we need is a simulated training on school shootings. We're back here, like suddenly I'm back in the early 2000s with this stuff. Oh, weird. I'm getting some feedback in my microphone. Hopefully it doesn't show up. But this is while Valve has been cracking down on booby games, on dating sims, and there was that notorious thing where they were going to crack down on Hoonie Pop, and then they said, no, we made a mistake. But the fact that they went there at all was really disturbing to me. While they were doing that, they missed this. And Valve is under no obligation to, how do I say this, host anything on their Steam service. They can carry any game they want. They can take down any game they want, much like ABC. And the fact that they were so busy running around chasing down these you know, dating sims that a small number of people play in the West, and they missed this. And now the entire gaming industry has to deal with respected services like CBC quoting things like that with absolutely nothing. There is nothing in this article. Have a look. There is nothing in this article that in any way refutes the statement that it is simulated training on school shootings. There is nothing in this article that says at all that games don't cause shootings. All they say is that other violent games have existed on Steam's platform, and they reference hatred without saying the name. They did not push back on the assertion that games are, quote, simulated training on school shootings at all, because these are mainstream news services who don't care about video games. They will bash video games for a headline. And it's funny because last week on Twitter, there was a thing about Mario Kart style game in Niagara Falls or something like that. And I said, how long until they're back to bashing video games? Like, they'll forget this the next time they have a chance to take a crack. And less than a week later, there we go. It was only a few days. But, well, again, I defend the right for game creators to make any game they want. Steam should not be censoring boobs, which last I checked never directly killed anyone. Like, maybe a few people ran into lampposts or got into minor fender benders rubbernecking at a hot chick or something like that. But boobs aren't weapons. Boobs are things that every woman and some men have. But they spent all their time running around with this, and then they allow this game through that is just going to cause problems. And they cannot argue we're a free speech platform anymore. If they had not gone after the dating sims, I would have been like, all right, it's just free speech. That's fine. That's how I'd like Steam to work, quite frankly. People aren't going to buy things that are garbage. So if something's just an attempt at outrage, it's not going to sell terribly well unless people make this big deal about it. But the minute Steam starts stepping in and saying, this is acceptable on our service, this isn't, well, then Steam is somewhat responsible for what it lets through. And to let through a game on school shootings, where when they're going after Animu dating sims for otaku, this tells me there's a real management problem at Valve, that they're being reactive instead of proactive. They don't have a clear company mandate about what they stand for, and they're just chasing their tail when somebody screams. And the fact that they couldn't even bother to give a comment for this article just speaks to they weren't prepared for this. And it's like, are you serious? You approved a game that, and none of the console companies have taken this game because they're not dumb. But like Valve and companies like Valve that have made a lot of money off gaming as a whole. And this is why I've always had an issue with Valve being a game publisher as well as a game distributor. I think, and you could say this about consoles as well, as they have their first party stuff. But Steam, I don't know, Steam is just so much bigger that they are responsible to an extent for being good stewards of the industry and not making, unforced errors like this that make everyone look bad. Because we know that violent games don't cause people to become violent in the real world. However, I think that since Valve is an American company, there is an argument for some sensitivity regarding the specific issue of school shootings. It is such a raw wound that it is just bad business for an American company to be releasing this game. And again, on free speech grounds, do what you want, right? I'm talking here about the fact that we constantly have to have this fight because Valve has abandoned the free speech position. They've abandoned this idea of we have adult content, we age lock everything like the laws require us to. We make it difficult for kids to access adult content, but that's not the same as not allowing the content on our service. I personally think that kids should not be using Steam unsupervised anyway, because it's a great way to run up your parents' credit card. But they've abandoned the position of like, look, we're not going to be the arbiters of taste. They became the arbiters of taste when they cracked down on boobs. And so this is just inexcusable at this point. Valve doesn't know what it is, and I don't think it knows what it wants to be other than rich and popular. And you can't just have that. You have to structure your business in a more deliberate way. And I'm really frustrated on behalf of gamers that Valve keeps making these dumb mistakes. They bow to the wrong pressure instead of the right pressure. And that's the difference between somebody who's being truly progressive and somebody who's just being politically correct. A true progressive takes criticism, goes, does this wash with my values? Yes, well, then I agree with the criticism. I'm going to make a change. Being politically correct means you just knee-jerk change what you're doing because of the existence of the criticism. It's not a thought-out response to it. And Valve clearly isn't thinking here with their actions with Steam. And so this is going to open up another debate. Hopefully, as a couple people said online, the Roseanne stuff will bury it. But this is a shining example of there's freedom of speech, which unlike some, I don't think is just limited to governments. In an era where controlled more and more by multinational corporations and quasi-government entities, non-government entities. The concept of free speech, and not just the First Amendment, which is a government protection, but the larger concept of free speech is exceptionally important. What are the limits of free speech? And I think that it's worthwhile to have that discussion, not a debate that's theater for an audience, but an actual real discussion of what is the difference between something being offensive and morally wrong? Because I can't reject something just on the fact that it's offensive. Offensive content has a right to exist. Why? Because at one point, the idea that gay people should get married was an offensive idea. It's not now, but at one point, yes, it was. At one point, the idea that women should be able to vote and own property and things like that were offensive to some. Abortion is still an offensive concept to many, despite the way, the world is moving. Offensive speech has a place. There is a difference between something being offensive, hurtful, and harmful. And, hurt and harm are the same thing. No, to me, it's not. Something can be openly offensive, but not intending to hurt anybody. The show South Park is an example of that. Everything's offensive. They go after everybody at some point. So because it's sort of equal opportunity offenders, the assumption is people won't watch because it's a known commodity and so no one gets hurt, right? Other things people don't intend to be offensive, but people still get their feelings hurt. And this is where we get into this really hoary territory of microaggressions, a term I hate because I think it actually minimizes some of the statements they claim are microaggressions. The implication that someone was not born in America just because they're not white is not a microaggression. That's just dumb. There's nothing micro about that. People have to stop doing that. But there's a difference between hurting someone's feelings, which can be addressed on a case-by-case basis. A lot of the time, the simple solution for that is, I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. That was absolutely not at all my intent. And having a discussion about it, that'll solve that problem. There's a real difference when something actually causes social harm. And the chilling of speech that some of the things that are happening on social media right now, I do believe are causing social harm, because there's freedom of speech on paper and then there's freedom of speech in practice. And I really do think that in practice, a great many people's freedom to speak, freedom to express themselves is being eroded. I know I feel like my freedom of expression as an artist is being eroded by YouTube's policies regarding women's bodies. Steam is going the same way. I really think that if, a Donald Glover as Childish Gambino can be totally shirtless for a whole video, he's just wearing a pair of pants, and everybody calls that brilliant art. Well, any woman should be able to do the exact same thing and have it received as brilliant art. But any thinking person knows that's not going to happen in this day and age, because there is a war on women's bodies going on, and indirectly on male sexuality. It is not right. It is limiting expression in a very real way. The same way the brigades, it would be easy to say these things are dog piles that just happen, and sometimes they do. But let's face it, there are all these subreddits just looking for stuff to attack. And one of them finally noticed me again. Woohoo! I got all these weird outrage warriors in my comments on the the Leisure Suit Larry video, and then somebody says, oh, that's a Gamer Ghazi mod. Oh, okay, that makes sense. They're back. Welcome back, Gamer Ghazi. I missed your warm hatred towards me. But these people chill speech. These people just make people so afraid to talk because it's not a question of the merits of your argument. If I'm wrong, if I say something stupid, then it's totally fair to criticize that. And you guys have. We've disagreed a lot, but most of you just don't go unsubscribe. Some people did on some of the dumbest things last week, which I thought was really funny. It's like, see ya. We are able to have discussions here that sometimes do get heated, but they don't get unproductive most of the time, which you guys know I'm very appreciative of. These outrage warriors, they come in and make discussions unproductive. And so we can't tackle difficult discussions like the conversation on race, the conversation on gender, these difficult sort of philosophical and philosophical ideas with very real world consequences. We can't have discussions about them because these people are actively trying to just chill speech through noise and bullying and negative campaigning, negative PR campaigns about a person who is in good faith trying to have a discussion. That's the difference to me between hurt and harm. And it's funny that the people who scream harm when they actually mean hurt, something just hurt their feelings and they claim it's socially harmful, they're the ones that are actually chilling the debate. And no political extreme is uniquely responsible for this. Both the extreme right and the extreme left do this. And they feed each other like there's this fight that the extremists are having that the rest of us are stuck in. And that's where I want to leave my last point on Roseanne. I think part of the issue is Roseanne's timing absolutely sucked. She picked the day that Starbucks was closing their stores for a whole afternoon as part of a massive publicity stunt. It's only about half their stores. They made it sound a lot bigger than it is. It was only the Starbucks owned stores, not the franchises. So the ones in like bookstores and movie theaters and malls and things like that. No, only the standalone Starbucks owned stores were closed. They didn't let that slip. But the day that they decided to do that, just as it was going underway, MSNBC is doing a town hall on racism in America. Roseanne Barr decided to go after the appearance of a black woman. And when there is this big, methane cloud and you light a match, things go boom. And I think part of the swift response from Disney was that they didn't want to get Starbucked. They didn't want to be pulled into that crap storm. And so they knew they had to be decisive. They were probably already sick of her. They didn't want to admit that this was a failed experiment on financial grounds, because then they get all those sort of people who felt like the show did speak to them and did speak for them, and they see the crazy good ratings and they don't understand why you're getting rid of a show, because they don't understand that a show with great ratings isn't necessarily popular. Isn't necessarily profitable. Something can be popular and not profitable, which sounds very strange, but it's a real reality of advertising. Part of the reason that there's still so many shows on TV that are male oriented that become these big things is because men buy stuff. Men are more responsive to ads. Men are more responsive to impulse buys and dumb high dollar impulse buys, like luxury cars and motorcycles and crap like that. Women are almost too discerning in our purchases to be fodder for advertisers. This is really unpopular, but I shit you not, I've been in the meetings. So yes, it's turning because they realize that women have a multiplied influence impact on a household, but there's still a lot of dollars in men. These are the yucky, how the sausage is made backstage realities of television. And that's why I wanted to share this with you guys, just so you're informed. So, as usual, leave a comment, have at it, but like, don't go to war. Just have a discussion. You guys are good at that, so I know you will. Thanks for watching.